There we go. It's not as bright anymore. Woof. The after shower morning hair. Let's begin, you guys. Like I said, we're talking about atonement and what we did for our sins before Jesus was a thing, right? Before Jesus was the final and kind of all-encompassing atonement. We had to go through a bit of a process in priesthood, really. This kind of starts like we talked about the church and the beginning of sacraments, that sort of thing, forgiveness of sins. That starts the foundations of the church, and we will learn exactly how that was done in the very beginning before we had the body and the blood, right? So let's go ahead and read a little quote here to intro off, just a short little line that says, more Latin, so bear with me. More Latin. An delectione hominium et adeo vitorum. Am delectione hominium et adeo vitorium. Which means, with love of mankind and hatred of sins. This is from Opera Ammonia Volume 2, Letter 211, Magnae's Prelude, 1845. Anyways, yes, this sounds like something of a priest would say, right? Lover of mankind, with love of mankind and hatred of sins. Or this is much like, we can liken this to Jesus, See, now I'm getting confused. It's a whole confusing thing. We can liken this to God, right? Loves mankind, does not like sin, does not like disobedience, does not like guilt. And again, we've discussed before, what is sin? Really, it's the result of an action. Sometimes it's not referred to as the action itself. It's the result of an action that leads to something bad, right? So we talk about karma a little bit. It's kind of like that. Sin is kind of like the bad karma that comes along with actions, because no action in itself is inherently good or bad. It's just the result of it that we are trying to negate, right? The result of the bad karma, or the bad karma, or the sin itself. That's what we want to try to avoid. So how do we atone for them and make up for them? That's why these actions, right, they can be forgiven and they can be made up for, because we are avoiding the bad karma, or we are avoiding the action. I would love to get into, dare I say, the science of atonement and why it works, but it's a little bit hard to put your finger on. We can come up with theories of, why this is something that works for forgiveness. But as we will learn, it's often just described as, an action that covers up, right? An atonement. And technically, if you break down the word, atonement means to cover, or atonement is like a cover to something. So atonement really means to kind of cover up the bad action, and so it does not result into some later action or sin or bad karma, right? So that is kind of the purpose of the atonement, to cover up or to make up for the bad action. The bad action, right? It's the action that would result in sin. So how do we do this? Aaron and his sons are in charge of this atonement. They are in charge of the church. They are in charge of providing these offerings. Let's begin with Leviticus, first part. The sons of Aaron, the priest, are to put fire on the altar and arrange wood on the fire. He shall tear it open by the wings, not dividing it completely, and then the priests shall burn it on the wood that is burning on the altar. It is a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. So as we hear here, I leave some lines out, but they are doing animal sacrifices technically, or they're taking the carcasses of animals, they're performing almost as butchers, right? Butchers, and they're burning it, they're cooking it essentially. And in a lot of these cases, that is food where the priests can actually eat it. So it's not totally going to waste except for the super burnt parts. They have to burn the fat and they have to burn the blood and all of that nasty stuff. But it is they're cooking it, and then the priests can actually eat it within the sanctuary afterwards. So it's not going to waste. And then something interesting here, it's the aroma that is pleasing to the Lord. It's the cooking and the eating that is pleasing to the Lord. The food is not going to waste, and it is a reflection or showing the Lord that you're doing something for him in replace of the action, right, that was displeasing. And then we talk about the grain offering. If your grain offering is cooked in a pan, it is to be made of the finest flour and some olive oil. If you offer a lamb, you are to present it before the Lord. This is the lasting ordinance for generations to come where you live. You must not eat the fat or blood. The priest shall then put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense. I think I missed a little line there. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Just does not flow like I was thinking it would flow. 4:7. Blood of the horns of the altar of fragrant incense. Okay, altar of fragrant incense. I guess that makes sense. Okay. The priest shall then put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense that is before the Lord in the tent of meeting. The rest of the bull's blood shall pour out at the base of the altar of the burnt offering at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So again, it's some sort of symbolism, right, that we have with the blood. It's mentioned a lot between offerings and atonement in general when we're talking about Jesus being the atonement, right? It's his blood that is sacred, right? But nobody is to touch it. It's technically unclean. You're not supposed to eat it. You're not supposed to keep it on you. It's just purely as a symbolism for this event, right? For the cleansing of sins. He shall then dip his finger into the blood and sprinkle it before the Lord 7 times in front of the curtain. If any member of the community sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, when they realize their guilt, right? And then it goes on to what you should do. Anyone who cannot afford a lamb is to bring 2 doves or 2 young pigeons to the Lord as a penalty for their sin, 1 for a sin offering and 1 for a burnt offering. If anyone sins and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, even though they do not know it, they are guilty and will be held responsible. In this way, the priest will make atonement for them before the Lord, and they will be forgiven for any of the things they did that made them guilty. So again, this is the way to make up for the sins, instead of just the Lord getting mad and his anger penting up and then he ends up killing people, right? Which has happened in the past. Excuse me, I do not mean to laugh, but it's happened in the past where he just unleashes the anger. This is better. This is just like a representation. It's like we are aware of our actions. We are sorry, right? We ask for forgiveness, and the Lord will forgive the people, right? And then we go into the grain offering again. It must not be baked with yeast. I have given it as their share of their food offerings presented to me. So again, the grain offering is not to be baked with yeast. They have baked with yeast. They do bake with yeast. It's not non-kosher or not halal, but it's just more symbolic way remembering the Passover. Again, I don't know why yeast is a big deal. Technically, it's like a fungi in the mold family, so it could have had something to do with the cleanliness of the product, of the food product. So that could be a reason here. Whatever touches any of the flesh will become holy, and if any of the blood is splattered on a garment, you must wash it in the sanctuary area. The same law applies to both the sin offering and the guilt offering. They belong to the priest who makes atonement with them. So again, this is mentioned here. The blood is to be washed off, but the sin offering and the guilt offering, they actually belong to the priest who makes atonement, so they can eat them symbolically within the sanctuary. Any meat of the sacrifice left over to the 3rd day must be burned up. Anyone who eats the blood must be cut off from their people. Again, it's not something that we consume, still not something that we consume. It's not healthy for us. We're going to talk a lot about in the future lines and future readings about the cleanliness of certain foods and why it's important. Anyways, these then are the regulations for the burnt offering, the grain offering, the sin offering, the goat offering, the ordination offering, and the fellowship offering. So these are the various categories of the offerings that were presented for atonement, to cover up sins, to say you're sorry, to offer or to petition for forgiveness. Again, we read in the beginning, the aroma is pleasing to the Lord. You ever sit in the kitchen when a family member is cooking, right? It smells so nice. You're hungry, and you cannot wait for the food. That is what the Lord likes to see. It's pleasing, that aroma, and it's pleasing to see you eating and enjoying your food, kind of in forgiveness and sorrow, and repenting for whatever was done, instead of more violence being taken out. The sins are kind of transferred onto an animal. That's another theory, kind of. They're transferred onto the animal dies. Yes and no. It's more so just the cooking and the enjoying of food, really. Even though it's very symbolic and very ritualistic and very, there's a way to do it that's very sacred. In the same way, it's kind of just like, cooking and enjoying a meal, essentially. But it's different. But kind of, that's just the vibe that I get from it, and why it's a positive thing to go ahead and cover up the thing. You cook a meal, you get over it, you eat some food, you feel better. That type of energy, right? But it seems a little archaic, right? Like reading it today, it's just like, this is so extra. Why was this a thing? We don't do this in church nowadays. Nope, because Jesus came and he was kind of that final sign. But what we do is have the sacrament of the Eucharist, which is the wine and the unleavened bread, or the whatever that little wafer is, I forget. But yes, that is the sacrament of the Eucharist. And not all churches do it too. That's mostly like Catholic and Christian. Now it's just more like, in say like the Jewish faith, I don't even want to say because I'm not a part of it. They have various ways, and then Islam has just the prayer and the full like submission by bending over and praying. That is another way that is recognized. So everybody has their own thing, but this is the very beginnings of the Leviticus book and the Israelites and how they would atone for their sins, because like we talked about, nobody was perfect. They made mistakes. If they did something that was against the law of the Ten Commandments, they're not banished to hell or they're not killed, right? They actually had a way of dealing with it effectively, and just making it a show and like a recognition, like, yes, that was wrong, we're going to go ahead and go through all of this process to atone for your sins. So it's kind of like, they made a big deal out of it, but it was nothing like the latter, right? The other options, which was good. It's a good thing. It's good. It's evolving and everything like that. So wonderful. That's all we're going to discuss today. Like I said, we went through 7 chapters in a little bit over 10 minutes. So these chapters are shorter. Also, they're less. So we have 20 or so chapters that we'll get through probably before the end of the week, which is great. That's really it. And then we'll get into some movement in numbers. I'm already looking ahead and excited, but that's all, guys. Have a good day. Enjoy your Tuesday. Good day.